This is Waves, a podcast from APTA Michigan. I'm Andy Wicks with Catherine Klein. We've talked about how the physical therapy world is full of opportunity, but the reality is that sometimes the job can seem monotonous, just like any other. Clock in, clock out, lather, rinse, repeat. If we want to make more money, we can try to climb the corporate ladder, maybe cram more patients into our schedule, but at what cost? F. Scott Feil is the kind of guy who doesn't see a problem, but instead sees the opportunity for a new solution. He is a physical therapist, an educator, and an entrepreneur. Scott talked with us about how he made his own path to success in the world of physical therapy. Well, let's begin at the beginning. Introduce yourself to us however you see fit.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Dr. F. Scott Feil. The F doesn't stand for anything. I was named after F. Scott Fitzgerald. My dad was an English teacher on Long Island for many, many years. But his first name was Francis, and he didn't want to name me Francis, so he left it as the letter F, which is cool till you turn 16. Then everything's first name, middle initial, and all your legal documents get screwed up. So thanks, Pop. Appreciate that one. A physical therapist, about 16 years, professor for the last 5, and recently transitioned into a new position, senior learning and development specialist, whatever that means. Basically just teach the teachers how to teach better, teach the students how to learn better, and a little bit of self-development sprinkled in the mix there, as things progress. So I've been enjoying the heck out of it. I've been trying to help people with my podcasts and my side business and making more money and more revenue and more profit so that they can pay down their student loans quicker and more efficiently because Lord knows the DPT profession in particular is in desperate need of that right now. The debt to income ratio is bad and getting worse. And, it's pretty much doom and gloom out there on social media if you look out there as much as people do. But the good news is, it's promising in that we have the skill sets that we need to do much, much more than just 9 to 5 clock in, clock out physical therapy. So
This is true.
Plenty of opportunity out there.
Okay.
Have no fear.
We actually just talked to, not long ago, Connor and Hannah Pierce, who run After the DPT. They have a similar kind of talking about that financial aspect of education, which is all the students that I work with, and I'm sure all the students you work with too, just try not to think about the money that they're borrowing, but I can't imagine that it's not in the back of their mind thinking about how are we going to pay this off. So,
we can't take the ostrich approach, right? Where we just bury our heads in the sand and all of a sudden there's $200,000 worth of student loan debt looking you in the face when you graduate. Like that's not going to get it done, right?
No.
And I'm not holding my breath for the government to figure it out because that doesn't seem like it's working out. So I'm just going to take it upon myself to do it my own way. And that just means making a little bit more money than we do for the typical 9 to 5,
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about the side hustle business, because that's something that you advocate a lot, I think, on social media and elsewhere. Yeah. What got you into that? What side hustles do you see that are like, oh, this got some potential, or this one maybe not so much?
Yeah, I didn't realize it, but, when I was young and my dad was an English teacher, in the summer times, he had a landscaping business, right? And his partner ran it all year, but he would help out in the summer and bring my brother and I along with him to help out, right? And so I didn't realize it then, but obviously he was an entrepreneur, right? And so in the summers, we would go down to Outer Banks, North Carolina, right? We had a house that was right up on the 10th tee of a golf course. And we'd go out and find golf balls at night, and then we'd sell them to the golfers on the 10th hole the next morning at the suggestion of my dad. And so I didn't realize it back then, but he was kind of, getting us ready for entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial mind. So I've always kind of just had this, creative mind. And, I was an English major before I was a PT. So not very linear there, not a straight and narrow path by any means. But I think, my penchant for creativity really helped me get into entrepreneurship and that and a little bit of ADHD and you got a recipe for success, So I think if you really break it down, I've always been doing little side hustles and side businesses, right? But in my current situation, for the last, I'd say decade, the first 5 or 6 years of my career, I was kind of trying to chase that corporate ladder and climb that corporate ladder and make more money that way. And every job I took made me more money as I climbed that ladder, but I wasn't happy. Like I was not, it was more admin stuff, more responsibility, managing personalities. It just wasn't worth the increase in pay that I was
Mhm.
getting. I'd rather just be a staff PT again and go back to no responsibility but my patients. So I realized about 5, 6 years into my career that I just needed medical benefit, right? My
Okay.
wife being a type 1 diabetic and a stay at home mom, I carry the benefits for our family. So if I could just find a job that I truly loved and enjoyed,
Mhm.
the medical benefits would be the key piece. And then whatever the difference in salary was, I could just make up somewhere else. And so that's kind of how I got started in the side business was like, hey, I'm working in a job that I actually truly enjoy and like, right? At the time, it was a combination of a skilled nursing facility and home health. And I love the geriatric population I came to find, which is a whole nother weird
Mhm.
rabbit hole, but that's for another day. So I just figured that like, all right, I'm doing all these little side hustles and side gigs and things that I'm learning to like stack my skills. I can just show people how to do that as well. And then hopefully they can take from that and learn from it and do their own things. Right. And so I eventually ended up starting a mobile physical therapy practice. And so I was working at the skilled
That I
nursing
do that too.
facility. Beautiful. I love it. I love to hear that because it's a great way to start out. It's a great way to get some business knowledge, but I was also doing home health and that on top of it. So it was like 80-hour weeks, and I knew it wasn't sustainable. And fortunately and unfortunately, COVID hit. And then I had to kind of do a reevaluation and a restructuring of what I was doing. And so then the, skilled nursing facility I was working at kind of forced us into COVID only units. And I didn't really want to risk bringing that home to my wife. So I kind of resigned at that position. And then the teaching position opened up. And I was like, well, maybe it is time to give this a try, even though I wasn't really all for it. But I tried it. I loved it and never looked back. So I have benefits, which is great. That works out pretty well. And I love what I do. I love, my 9 to 5. And then I love my side business. I love business. I kind of feel like I'm a little bit of a black sheep in academia. I kind of get looked at weird when I talk about business and all the things we could do in business. And academicians and students don't always get it. But we're trying, we're breaking through a little bit. So yeah, I just kind of started out with the mobile business. Then I realized I wasn't very good at marketing. So I had to take some courses in digital marketing and Facebook ads and all that, got better at that. Then I showed a couple of people in practices how to do that. And then every skill set that I just stacked, I started adding to the list of things that I could teach because I knew enough about it to show other people what I was doing. And that just grew into a real love for business and problem solving and consulting. I never thought I'd be doing consulting, but I was working for a workman's comp company. And, I told them we should be educating on the front end so that these people don't get hurt as much and we lower their workman's comp costs. And they're like, oh, no, we're not going to do that. It'll eat into our PT costs. I said, all right, I'll do it myself. So I started a consulting company, just going around to local businesses and saying, hey, would you like to lower your workman's comp costs? Great. I can teach your people, all of your employees, proper lifting,
Yeah.
ergonomics, body mechanics, like hydration, proper diet, health, exercise, sleep, all the things that we know work for everybody. I just happen to know how to teach them pretty well too, because, oh yeah, I've got an EDD and a DPT. So
Yeah.
like it worked out. And it's all skills that I already had. Am I an expert in ergonomics? Did I go take a PhD in ergonomics? No. But I knew enough from my PT background, right? I've read a textbook or two. I took a course in it. And I knew enough in business and I knew enough in education to just merge those skills that I had
Yeah.
and provide a service and literally solve a problem for people. So that's how I kind of got into it. And it just kept growing and growing ever since then. And luckily, I'm a lifelong learner. So I have this thirst for knowledge and learning more and more and more. And it just so happens to be about learning and education and business and critical thinking and problem solving. And it's weird how they all sort of meet together at some point. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Nice. Kind of see a need, meet a need kind of thing.
Exactly.
There you go. Yeah, Catherine, you're in a similar background there in terms of kind of going off on your own,
Yeah,
doing your own thing.
I think for me, I guess I realized one, I have some like kind of chronic health things that I manage, and being in a like full 40-hour plus treatment schedule wasn't great for those things. And then two, kind of like you, was like searching for ways to be more creative and like frustrated by feeling like you're saying the same things over and over again to people. And part of the reason people keep showing back up into PT or having issues is because of like systemic problems in how their life works or how their job is or whatever, that I just feel like our skill set, we could be doing more in a lot of different ways. So I really resonate with what you're saying. And I think PTs in general, I think we're kind of hesitant to say that we're an expert in something if we haven't taken 10 continuing education courses about it or whatever, when it's like, you know, more than most people. And there's a lot of people with no training out there on Instagram or whatever saying that they know what we know, and they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's people way dumber out there doing things that
Yeah.
are making way more money
Yeah.
than you are, I promise.
Yeah.
And it's not all correct. I mean, we've seen it. You go out there on Instagram and you look and you're just like, oh no, that's not right at all.
Yeah.
Oh boy, we need to. So at the very least, we need to counteract those negative and incorrect sources and at least put enough good, positive, correct information out there, you know? So that's part of our duty, is to battle that stuff. I don't, know that you necessarily need to get in the Twitter feuds and whatnot, but at the very least, let's give some like alternative options for people to learn from that we know to be correct. Like, hey, we've been to school, we put in a ton of time and work and effort, and we know the evidence. Here it is.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it.
That's the hardest part, is communicating that to the audience that doesn't have a medical training background. Communicating those skills in a way that is understandable, clear, concise, things like that. Man, those skills are worth their weight in gold. And that's something that, the program where I teach, we have a class where that is a strong component of it, of the curriculum there, but I still don't feel like it's enough to really to help a student become a good communicator.
Yeah. So, Andy, it's interesting that you bring that up, right? Because Myron Golden, if you guys have ever heard of him, he wrote a book called Trash Man to Cash Man, right? And he was literally a trash man for many years. And then he decided he just wasn't going to, stand for that anymore. He wanted to do more, be more, have a bigger impact, right? And so he says there's 4 basic levels of value. And when we look at it, the first level is like implementer or like technician, right? It would be like equivalent to like PTAs, techs, staff physical therapist, entry level type. They're just there to clock in, clock out, do their 9 to 5 and go home. That's it. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. We need that. But there's a ceiling to that, right? There's only going to make as much salary as their job will allow. At some point, there's a ceiling to what they can give you and still be profitable and keep the lights on going, right? The next level up from that becomes manager, right? And that's where they kind of, like I was talking about, like you make more money, but you have a little more responsibility. There's some admin stuff, and then you got to manage personalities. And truth be told, the bump in salary that you make, to me, isn't necessarily worth all that extra hassle that goes.
You might be getting pulled away from the reason why you wanted to PT in the first place.
Right. If you don't want to do admin and paperworky type stuff, well, then, that's bad news for you. Then the third level becomes communicator. And that's the level I try to get all of my clients to, is master communicator, right? Because at the very least, if you can communicate something very well with radical clarity, that people from the top to the bottom can all understand what you're preaching and what it means and why it's important, they'll actually follow you to do the thing that you're trying to do and complete the mission and the vision that you have. Now, the fourth level is way up there, and it's literally out of this world type stuff, right? And it's the imagination. It's people like Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Bezos, right? Like all these people that had sometimes otherworldly ideas, right? They're trying to get us to Mars type stuff, right? And that's fine. If that's where you want to be, if you literally want to level yourself up to that fourth level, by all means, have at it. But just realize that came at a very big cost with a lot of sacrifice along the way. And you don't have to do all that to be an innovator, to be a creative thinker. You can do that same stuff and still make a very good living at the master communicator level. So like you said, if you can get good at communicating anything, and then you're also pretty decent at sales, that is a winning recipe. You've got to know sales. That the 2 biggest things in all of humanity, not just in business, not just in PT or healthcare, is literally communication and sales. And when I say sales, it's not just like, hey, give me money for this thing. You're selling yourself when you're a new grad to try to get a job. You're selling yourself to your future employer, right? When you're trying to sell your idea and your plan of care to a patient, you're trying to sell that plan of care to the patient. It's almost like there's a little bit of overlap between communication and sales. So we have to try to demonize the word sales and realize that it's kind of more so just helping people make better, more well-informed decisions.
It does have
That's
sometimes
what a
kind
real
of an
good sale
icky
does.
connotation of like
Yeah.
the
Well, you
high
think used
pressure
car
salesman.
salesman.
Yeah, exactly. Used car
Yeah.
salesman. And I
Yeah.
feel like I heard somewhere coming from a salesman, a good product sells itself. You don't need to try to convince someone of it because they can innately see its value. And that's hard, I think, for people to do for themselves. I think especially where Catherine and I are here in the upper Midwest, like we tend to devalue and deface and don't really puff ourselves up very much. And sometimes that can be to our detriment, I think, because how do you teach a student, a new grad, those questions of not only for applying for a job, but negotiating salary and doing things in like, what is a fair and honest way of doing it without feeling like you got to be deceptive or whatever it means. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of that goes into just your values, right? And your integrity. You've got to have that stuff first. You've got to have a strong foundation in that first and know what you stand for, right? Otherwise, you don't stand for anything, right? So like, you've got to know what your real values are. And as long as you live an authentic and integrous life, should be no problem. But I think if we circle back around on one of the things you said earlier, when you're dealing with people who are not in healthcare and don't have the background and training that we do, they may not see the value because they may not even know some of the things that are going on and how things could work or could help without the education that we would be providing them in order to sell them on this plan of care that they need, right? Like, so it's almost your duty to teach them and educate them and sell them on that thing, right? If let's just say there's a terrible disease and you happen to have the cure for it. If all these people come to you and they're like, hey, what do we do? And you're like, well, I don't know, there's this thing that might work, but I don't really feel great about pitching you and selling you on it, but it works. It's kind of your duty to sell it to them, right? Because it's going to help them. It's going to heal them. So like, you have to kind of look at it that way too, where if you're not convinced, if you don't have absolute conviction in what you're selling, then by no means should you go out and sell that. You have to believe that it works. You have to believe that it is the solution to their problem. Otherwise, you shouldn't be selling it to them.
Yeah.
Your solution, your problem, like whatever it is that you're solving, it may not be for everybody, and that's okay. But then it's up to you to not sell it to the people that don't need it and to sell it to the people that do.
I think where physical therapy has like higher communication burden than like, let's say some people from the internet that are selling their magic pillow that will solve your neck problems for the rest of your life, is the good PT is nuanced. It's specific. It's not like a one size fits all answer. So, and I think that is a more complicated message than sleep on this pillow and solve all of your problems, or use this machine every day for 10 minutes and it'll fix everything. So I guess that does make me feel like we have to up our games even that much more.
Yeah, and it's not totally our fault. I mean, if you just look at the United States in general, we've got a pretty bad problem of taking responsibility for our own health. And so we just want the quick fix. We want the pill. We're lazy. We just, whatever's going to, just give me the meds, give me the surgery, whatever it is, right? We don't want to put in the hard work. We don't want to put in the time, effort, and energy it takes to learn what's right, what's wrong, what to do, what not to do, and then actually do the reps, right? You can learn about and read all the books on how to get the biggest bicep, but unless you're doing the reps with the weight, you're not going to get the biggest bicep, right? So like, we already have that to go against, right? We're fighting that uphill battle. So it's not totally our fault, but now we have to up our game to figure out how to break down that barrier, right?
Towards the end of my time in the clinic, I drifted away from that, trying to sell the product, and really more of just like, here are your options. And all I can do is present you these options. The choices then are yours in terms of what you do with those. It puts a little more of the onus on the patient than on the therapist, but it's tough when, like you just said, that's not necessarily what they want.
Yeah, and I wish, I wish I had the solution for you there. I think, at the end of the day, you can present the options and you can do all the education and all the right things in the world, and they are still just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you that sometimes. They'll be open and honest.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to do that. Okay, good conversation. Glad we had it.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, you can
Yeah.
only do what you can do, right?
Yeah. So this was an eye-opening moment for me. It's a light bulb moment. When I worked at the Workman's Comp Clinic, I was doing pretty well. It was basically FedEx guy hurts his low back, FedEx guy hurts his low back, UPS guy hurts his low back. Like, it was a lot of low back strains. I got pretty good at low backs, right? And I would get these people better pretty quickly and get them back to work. But there were always like a handful of patients over the course of my career that I just could not get better. I did everything I can. I was throwing the kitchen sink at them, literally. And I just was like, I must just be a terrible therapist because I cannot get these people better, right? And at one point, the doc who was running the clinic, overseeing the clinic, came over to me. He's like, why do you beat yourself up so much over this? I'm like, well, I'm trying everything in the book to get them better. He's like, yeah, but do you realize you keep coming back to me and asking these questions about this one patient? And I'm like, yeah, I can't get them better. He's like, have you ever thought that maybe it doesn't benefit them to actually go back to work?
Yeah.
Like, they want to be on the couch, taking in mailbox checks and just not going to work?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, duh. Like,
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, there's malingerers in this world, especially in the world of workman's comp. So keep that in mind. So I had to separate the outcomes from myself as a therapist and just my value. I was like, man, I must suck. When in reality, it was just like, oh, these guys didn't want to get better. There was nothing I could do that was going to change this outcome. And once I started separating that, I just saw that all I could do was the best I could do. And that was it.
Yep.
Much like you, Andy, when you finally just say, hey, here's your options, take them or leave them. And then you kind of got to put the onus back on them. So yeah, that was a eye-opening experience for me, but one that I much needed to kind of show that it wasn't me as a person or a therapist. It was, on the other end sometimes.
But we have enough, pride is maybe not the most accurate term, but hubris is maybe too strong of a word, but somewhere in the middle there, like, we like to think we're good at what we do. And when we lose, it stings. We don't like that. But when they're cheating, then it makes me a little bit better. I want to go back to a little bit what you were talking about very at the beginning, about you talking about kind of the business world in academia and how you get those dirty looks from all of us ivory tower academicians who scoff at the world of business. But it's how many students come into every cohort wanting things like, I want to own my own clinic one day. Fantastic. I'm glad that you do. I'm glad there are people that do that. And how much education is provided currently? Like, Catherine, how much education did you get in school about owning your own business? I know there was probably something.
I mean, we had a business course where I think the final project, it was like a group project, and you had to like come up with your business plan and, decide where you're going to put your clinic and what patient population. So, I mean, there's that, and you had to present it. So it's not like nothing, but there's definitely more to connecting the dots, out in the real world than what you get in school. But I mean, you can only learn so much in school, right? Like you don't. Yeah.
Where are you going to put
it? I think, if you want to be a good physical therapist, whether you want to own a clinic or not, like, you need to learn a lot after you graduate from PT school too. So I guess that's my 2 cents.
So I taught the business and admin course for our program, mostly because no one else wanted to do it. And I love that stuff, right? And what I tried to do was give the 1% that was going to be on the NPTE and be like, hey, here's what you need to know. But then also, here's the real world too, right? And so I felt like by showing them all the options and opportunities that were out there, at least I gave them the open the mind to like, hey, these are possibilities and options. We have all these skill sets that we already learned, right? From like time management to prioritization to communication, right? Soft skills, like all these things that we learn throughout grad school can translate into other things, right? But I think too, like the bigger issue for me was, okay, if you don't know anything about business and a student comes to you and says, hey, I think I want to open my own practice, like that's fine. Don't shoot them down. Like at least just refer them to like some good options or resources, right? Like hell, send them my way. I'll
Yeah.
talk to them, right? Like
I definitely
they don't
pretend
have to
be
be
an
in my
expert there.
class. Right. Or send them to the APTA's private practice section,
yeah.
right? There's a lot of good resources there. Like there's plenty of options. And I wish this stuff existed back when I graduated, right? Because I would have done things totally different. The internet was barely a thing when I graduated, right? It was the dinosaurs were still roaming. So like, it's just one of those things where it's like, look, guys, now is the best opportunity ever. Like the internet has made things awesome. You can go out and be a PT and still do other things. You can go out and be a professor and still do other things. Like they're all out there for you to just grab. Like the world is your oyster, right?
Yeah.
So the big thing for me has been kind of trying to break down those barriers a little bit and like those negative connotations of business and stuff, but really just showing people that, look, no matter where you're at in your life, right, you should be on some sort of journey toward mastery, right? You should have some sort of goal or zone of genius or North Star that you want to follow and get to eventually. You may never become the Michael Jordan of your thing, but at least strive to, right? Try to be, right? Put in the work, practice with intention, right? Continually learn. And along the way, even if you don't get there, it's like that cliche phrase, right? Aim for the moon. Even if you miss, you fall amongst the stars. So like, by putting in all that work and doing the right things, eventually you're going to get pretty damn good at whatever it is you're trying to get good at, right? Along the way, as you get better, again, you can start teaching all of those people behind you who don't know the stuff that you know, all the things that you do know. It's just kind of one of those things where when the student's ready, the master reveals themselves, right? It's like, oh, I really want to get into, quarterbacks and physical therapy, right? I want to be the best quarterback PT ever. I don't know where to start. Oh, really? Well, there's a couple of guys doing that already. Why don't you listen to their podcast, buy their book, go to one of their courses, ask to work for them. You can get good at just quarterbacks if that's your thing and that's your niche and that's what you want to do, right? I've worked with a gal who did cheerleaders, specifically cheerleaders, and she's killing it. She's crushing it. She's got her own gym. She's a PT for the gym. She also coaches classes, gymnastics, cheerleading. She's got a book out there. She's got courses. She does public speaking. It's like, all the things, and she was this little tiny old middle of nowhere PT that just wanted to work on cheerleaders, and now she's doing it and living the dream. There's so many options out there. It's like just pick the thing you love and that zone of genius and just lean into it and don't stop and document the whole process. Because
Catherine,
eventually you're going to get
what's
pretty
your
good.
My
of
zone
genius?
of genius is working with kids and young adults who have problems with pee and poop.
That's a good one because it
It's
does
very
exist. And yeah. And if you can fix that, you are saving a ton of people, a ton of time, effort, energy, and money. So I know a lot of people that would fork over good money to help their kid with that stuff. So well done.
You were talking about how the internet has made things, it's changed the game. This brand new thing called the internet. Maybe you've heard of it. But the fact that that 9 to 5 kind of clock in, clock out clinic job, I think is actually becoming rarer and rarer. And maybe that's not a bad thing, because that model also, I think, is working less and less for people. Maybe in the outpatient clinic, we have clinics that are staying open later because a lot of folks are also working during 9 to 5 and they maybe can't take off of work to go to get some medical help or, whatever it might be. Or I think it's just interesting that variety is becoming more acceptable. I don't know if that's the right term, but also the idea of people kind of making their business whatever they want it to be. Like it doesn't even necessarily have to fit the mold of another existing business. Like, yeah, you can maybe find someone who's been successful and follow what they do, but build your own thing and make it whatever you need it to be. And if it's a business, like we've talked to a couple of people who've run their clinics who, in their budget, they budget that they're going to donate like 20% of their margins to charitable organizations or pro bono services or whatever it is. and that's just part of what they do, or whatever it can be. I think it's just fascinating.
Yeah, Ryan Shelton, right? The
Yes.
philanthropy
Yep.
PT. He's got his whole clinic based around
Yep.
pro bono and donations, and he's just doing amazing stuff, right? Yeah, I think the key here, and I try to teach this to all of my clients, but like build the lifestyle you want first,
Yeah.
then figure
Yeah.
out the business around it. Otherwise, you're going to
Yeah.
end up working 80 hours a week, and it's not going to work for you. I promise. Been there, done that. Like, it's just, it's not worth it. Like, I would much rather be in a situation where it's like 40 hours a week for my 9 to 5 and 15 to 20 on the business. That's a lot more manageable than 80 hours a week. And realize that there is not such a thing really as work-life balance, right? We talk about this, like Rebecca Griffith, I give her credit for this one. She calls it life work flow, which is a lot more realistic because we should be putting our life first. Work should come kind of second, right? And then it's a flow. It's seasonal. It has ups and downs. There's seasons where you're going to have to lean more into work because of deadlines. There's seasons where you're going to have to kind of figure out, oh, I need to be here at home a little bit more, right? So it's never going to be in balance. And even if we work a 9 to 5, that's 40 hours a week we're spending at work. So that has to be kind of allocated. And a lot of people that I've talked to have worked on getting the lowest amount of hours possible to keep full-time benefits, which could be 30, 32 hours a week. And they're good with that. And then they take that extra 10 to 15 and do a side business or something like that. But I don't ever recommend just like burning the ships and going all in on business either. Like I really do recommend you have something to cover your overhead, right? Your meals and your food and your housing and car and all that, right? Bills. And then start the side business and grow it and grow it and grow it. And eventually, if it becomes big enough where you have to leave the 9 to 5 and go all in, by all means, do it. Congratulations. You've got a pretty successful business. Keep on doing what you're doing. Right. But for me, I know my playing field. I know it's going to be 40 hours and 10 hours or 40 hours and 20 hours. Right. And I'm good with that. Like all I can do is the best I can do in those extra 10 to 15 hours and give it my all. And whatever that is, it is. Right now, fortunately, again, thanks to the internet, plenty of opportunities out there to find VAs and part-time assistants and help that can help you scale and be the other you that you can't be there during the 9 to 5 hours. They can help do a lot of that stuff. So, man, plus I've got a very supportive wife who's helping out with social media now too. So that's very helpful.
Nice.
I don't have to do that aspect of things, but because I don't really like it anyway, but yeah, it's you just resourceful people find ways, right? And business owners and entrepreneurs at the end of the day, we're just problem solvers. That's all we just find solutions, right? We find ways to get it done. And I think, truth be told, physical therapists are pretty good at that too, because we're constantly trying to problem solve. We're constantly trying to adapt exercises, adapt plans of care, adapt equipment. So if you're just constantly figuring out ways to fix things and adapt things, that can be applied to business and entrepreneurship too. So there's another overlap, right? They just keep coming back to like, hey, this is set up pretty well for you to do some pretty cool things out there.
I think one thing, I think you touched on it briefly towards the beginning, but I think it's worth repeating that salary isn't the sole determination of what makes a good job. In fact, I think it shouldn't even be maybe top 3. Like, obviously, yes, you want to make enough money to live the lifestyle you want, but to recognize that things like what's the culture of the clinic that you're going to be in? What are the expectations that are there? What are the people like that are going to be there? You could get, a 6-figure salary out of college or out of grad school. Fantastic. But does everyone there suck? Like, is it worth it? Do you want to do that? I don't know. And to recognize like, yeah, what is everyone I think has different criteria for what satisfies them for a job. I think that's okay. It doesn't need to be salary. And I think there's a lot of ways that works.
Yeah, there's a good book. I think I got it back there somewhere. It's called The Happiness Factor.
Okay.
And it goes through the 12 different things that people look for in a job to make themselves happy. And salary is like not even on the list. Because again, a salary is going to be a range for your profession, right? So you're going to be making anywhere from 60 to 120,000 as a PT. That's just the range. There's highs, there's lows, there's the median, right? But like again, I'd much rather take 80,000 and be happy than 100,000 and be miserable because I've been there. And one of the biggest things, like you mentioned, is do the people suck, right? I've left bad bosses time and time again, right? And that's a big one for people. They don't leave bad businesses or jobs. They leave bad bosses.
Yeah.
And so you have terrible management. not going to last long, right? And I think we know at this point, burnout, it's a buzzword, but it's probably used overkill at this point. It's like, all right, burnout's everywhere though. Leaving a 9 to 5 clinic to go to, say, academia or something like that is not going to solve your burnout. Like, burnout exists even in entrepreneurship, even in academia, even in the clinic. It's a thing. It's more about self-management
Yeah.
and knowing yourself and knowing when the signs are coming on of burnout and when I need to pull back a little, when I need to pause, when I need to think harder, when I need to work harder. It's really more know thyself than anything. That's
Yeah.
the biggest tip for beating burnout, is like, you can see it coming. You can sense it coming. You know all the signs and symptoms, and then like realize, oh, I'm seeing a couple of these. I probably need to take a little pause here. I need to either take a day off or a vacation, a mental health day, or, hit the beach or something, right? Go golfing, go fishing, whatever. But you got to, take care of yourself. It's that oxygen mask thing. You got to put it on yourself first, or else you're useless to everybody else.
Catherine, do you remember what you said about your sign
Yes,
of
I
needing
do.
to
Well,
take a
I was
vacation?
just reminded of that. Thankfully, I haven't felt that in a really long time, so it's not fresh on the mind. But yeah, especially when I was a new PT, if I was working with someone and they came in and they had told me like, "Oh, I'm so excited! Like, I could be able to do this," and like fresh, normal me would like automatically react to that. But if I'm starting to feel burnt out, there's like that delay of like, oh yeah, I should I should feel happier. I need to show them that I'm excited for them right now. So then I know it's time for a day off, time to recharge.
When Catherine stops
Mhm,
caring,
mhm.
things are going bad.
Yeah. In the
But
red.
honestly,
exactly.
when one of the things that I wish that I had realized or I had known especially when I first started working as a PT, is if something doesn't like, and I think maybe it might be more common in young women. So to any young women listening or new clinicians, if something didn't feel right to me, I always had this tendency to think there's something wrong with me. I need to fix something in myself rather than like, oh, no, my boss is just kind of a dick.
Bleep that out now, Catherine.
But
Thank you.
I guess I really resonate with what you said about it's important to know yourself and know what's important to you and what your capacity is and what you want out of your life. And the more you know that, the happier you're going to be.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Yeah, you've got to know what you stand for, right? Everybody has a limit. They have this like, this is as far as I can go. There's a line in the sand, and once that's crossed, nope, that's it. I'm out. And it's different for everybody, but it's literally what we tolerate. It's whatever we'll tolerate. That's what'll keep happening too, right? If you have a boss that's a little different, if you have a tough job or position, the more you tolerate, the more they'll keep pushing, the more it'll keep feeling uncomfortable because you're tolerating.
It's
So
like
until you
parenting a
stand up
toddler.
against it. Yeah. I can't even tell you how many times that I've not tolerated it at some point and lost my top because I'm like, this is insanity. What are we doing here? And then I realized, oh, that's right. You're 3 years old and don't understand.
Your
Real
frontal
life
lobe isn't
adulting.
working. Okay, that's
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah, my bad. So yeah, it just comes to whatever we'll tolerate, right? We all have a level of toleration. And once that toleration is broken, it's it, we're out, or you should be. Otherwise, you stay in there and you're stuck. And it's like, well, now what? Because you're just going to be miserable and it's going to get worse.
I feel like COVID did one thing for the workforce, and it gave people a lot more permission to leave those situations. I feel like I have no data to back that up, but I feel like people are much more willing to be like, see ya, I'm done. I'm going to find something else.
Yep.
All right.
And real quick, like
Yeah.
I just want to put this out there as a caveat. Business and entrepreneurship is not always the answer either. I'm not saying that's for everybody. Owning your own business and being an entrepreneur is not for everybody, right? Don't just think, I'll just leave this job and start another one. Like, starting a business can be difficult. You have to have passion. You have to love it. Otherwise, you're going to just cut and bail when it gets tough. And it will get tough, I promise. But just realize if you're not happy, that's okay. Find something else that will make you happy. It doesn't have to be starting your own business. It can be another job. Like I said, I'd much rather work at a job where I'm making $80K, but I'm happy. I'll figure out the other $20K in difference. Like, that's not a problem. But find that first. That's the key, is finding your happy place first. What's something that you can quote unquote tolerate for a prolonged period of time, maybe till retirement, and then how can you supplement? How can you add? How can you make it better? How can you optimize?
So normally At this point in the podcast is when I say that we are very pro soapbox, and I encourage you to get on a soapbox if you have one, but I kind of feel like you've been doing that for the last 4
Yeah,
years.
I've been on there.
But if you
ready for
have
me to
any
get off the
others-
soapbox?
If you have any others that maybe we haven't touched on, by all means, climb aboard and say your business.
Yeah, I mean, again, the big takeaway is do more, be more. You have to put, like, 9 to 5 clock in, clock out therapist is just not enough in my mind. If you're going to be held to a higher esteem because you have a doctoral degree and a license, then you should be doing more with it. Treating one-to-one patient care is great. You're going to help out maybe 8 to 10 people that day, and it might affect their circle of people, maybe friends and family members. So you helped maybe 20 to 30 people that day, right? But if you could treat one-to-many instead of just one-to-one, if you could write a book that's going to help hundreds and thousands of people, if you could give a speech that's going to impact 500 to 1,500 people, if you could create a course that's just going to continue to educate and help people with your knowledge, your mastery, your expertise, that's what we need to be doing. Like, we have the skills, we have the authority with our licenses and our degrees and our life experiences. Go out there and be more, do more. There's no excuse not to. There just isn't. If it matters that much to you, if it means that much to you, then let's do it. Get out there and do more, be more. Because at the end of the day, if you're working a 9 to 5 and you're like, oh, I just need more money. Well, okay, great. You get a PRN job, you're going to make more money. But is that really making you happy? Is that making, an impact in the world? Like you're having to learn a new EMR. You're the only one there on weekends on your own little island, right? You're having to do all the things by yourself. And you're just making somebody else rich at the end of the day. So if you're going to put time, effort, invest in yourself. That's going to be one of your best investments. So yeah, go do more and be more. That's my takeaway. That's my soapbox on top of the soapbox.
Nice. Well, you heard it here first. So, F. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom with us. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me, man. This
Yeah,
was awesome.
really
Yeah,
good to
great
talk with you.
conversation.
We'll put whatever contact information you want to share, we'll put it in the show notes. So stalk him, follow him, learn all his wisdom. All right.
Yeah.
We'll see you later.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks, you guys.
Links to F. Scott Feil's social media accounts and podcast can be found in the show notes. He is a Renaissance man with wisdom to share. Waves is a production of APTA Michigan. It is hosted by Dr. Catherine Klein and me, Andy Wicks. Editing help this episode from Bracken Busker. We can be found at APTA-MI Waves on social media or at www.aptami.org. If you are a PT or PTA in Michigan, don't forget that you can earn PDR credit simply by listening to Waves episodes. See the show notes for details. Thank you for listening, and may your documentation always be done on time.